Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another chapter of CSEET Business Communication. So today we will be studying chapter 2, that is enriching vocabulary, and this video will be part 1 of the chapter 2. So without further ado, let's begin. So when we say enriching vocabulary, we first need to understand what vocabulary means. So vocabulary is nothing but a person's knowledge of words. So the person's knowledge of words, it basically means that the words that the person knows, how that particular person is using the words that they know in their communication, be it written or verbal. So why is vocabulary so important when it comes to the English language? So not only in the English language, vocabulary is important in all the languages that we communicate in. So the first and the foremost importance of vocabulary is improving the communication skills. So now a person, if their vocabulary is rich, if they're aware of a lot of words and if they're using the words in the right way, it can help improve their communication skills. And this communication skills can be both written as well as verbal. So if a person is well aware of the words in the language that they are using and is well aware of the context in which that particular word needs to be used, then the person's vocabulary is rich enough, and this will help in improving their communication skills. Not only communication skills, they will be able to understand the language that they speak or that they are hearing from another person. So understand the language, and also comprehension will be improved. Comprehension of their reading will be improved if the person possesses a rich vocabulary. So to make sure we are using the vocabulary in the right way, we need to understand the choice of words that we have while we are communicating with any person. So how exactly should the choice of words be determined? So now, firstly, your choice of words will be determined in the range of your vocabulary. Range of vocabulary basically means to what extent are you aware of the words that are there in the language? To what extent are you aware of the right usage? So firstly, you need to be aware of the words, and you need to be aware of the usage of the word. So this will determine your range of the vocabulary, and these will influence the choice of words that you use in any given communication. Next up is the audience to which you are communicating. So you need to understand whether the audience, if their vocabulary is rich enough to understand. So say, for example, if there is any technical term or any technical conversation that we are having, so we need to understand if we need to use technical words, if the audience is capable of understanding technical words, or if layman's language can be used to help them understand better. So we need to understand what is our audience, what is their understanding or capability in that particular subject or that particular conversation. And accordingly, we need to choose the words that we communicate with. Next up is the message to be conveyed. So now, while communicating, there might be multiple scenarios or instances in which a user communicates. So say, for example, if a person wants to express anger, then their choice of words will be different. If the person wants to express like appreciation, if they want to appreciate someone, then their choice of word will be different. Similarly, so basically, depending on the message that is to be conveyed, your choice of words will be influenced. Next is the type of communication that in which the person is communicating. So this could be formal communication, or it could be informal communication. Now, say for example, a person is having a conversation with their colleague, which is a verbal conversation. Then that conversation will mostly be informal. And now, say for example, that conversation needs to be captured on a document or in the form of an email. So even though it was the same colleague, it will be a more formal communication. The usage of words will be different. That is, say for example, in informal communication, we use abbreviations such as isn't it or wouldn't it or won't. So the same will not be used whenever there is a formal communication. Is it not, would not. These kind of words will be used in formal communication. So depending on the type of communication that the person is having with another person, the words or the choice of words is influenced. Next, similar to the type of communication, the context or usage. So basically, which scenario you are currently in, or in which context you are speaking to someone, your choice of words will be influenced. And coming to the last part that influences the choice of words majorly is the regional or the national differences. So depending on where the person is residing or where the person is from, their vocabulary will be different. Like say, for example, even in English language, majorly in India, two types of language is used. So one is the British English and the other one is the American English. So how does this differ? Like the same words can have different pronunciations or different meanings, or for the same meaning, there might be different words in both British as well as American English. So basically, the region that you are from, the nation or the place where you are residing, that can also influence the kind of words that you will be using while communicating the English language. So these are all the factors that determine the choice of words that the person goes for, or based on what vocabulary they are well versed with. So coming to the next part of the chapter. So how do we know? So we now know what are the factors that influence the choice of words. So we saw how a person's range, the type of communication, the audience you are communicating with, all of this can determine your choice of words. But how do we know which are the right words that needs to be chosen? So here are a few quick tips for choosing the right words. So we'll go through them one by one. First one. First one is simplicity. So the word in itself helps us understand that any word that we are choosing, it needs to be simple, it needs to be to the point, it needs to be precise. So when we are saying simple, it means that to the point or something that is easily understandable. So how does this help? Why do we say we need to choose simple words? To make sure that the person who is receiving the communication, the person who is on the receiver's end, is able to understand what we are trying to communicate. So using of simple words over the difficult words will make sure that the conversation remains effective and what you want to communicate is being communicated effectively. However, one thing that we need to keep in mind is, for maintaining simplicity, we should not sacrifice or compromise on the meaning of what we are trying to communicate. So just to keep the conversation simple, if we are losing the authenticity of the sentence or of the point, then there is no advantage of using simple words. So simple words should be used to an extent where they are giving out the exact meaning without sacrificing on the authenticity of the word. Next one is familiar words. So what do we say when we mean familiar words? So familiar words are those which are commonly used in any conversation. So say, for example, if in a formal setup, if we want to say that the contract has ended, we would say the contract has terminated. However, while using this in a layman's language in non-technical terms, terminated would not be the right word to use, because this becomes very technical, this becomes very related to the subject. So instead of that, we can say the contract has ended. So if we are using ended, so ended is a more familiar word as compared to terminated. So similarly, we should use familiar words to make sure that the sense in which the speaker is trying to communicate is the same sense in which the listener understands what the speaker is trying to communicate. Next up is jargon. So jargon is subject specific or technical words that are used when trying to communicate in that particular scientific language or legal language, say for example. So jargon is anything that is used in a specific field. So we might have scientific jargons, we might have technical jargons, we might have legal jargons. So jargons are to be used when we also know that the receiver or the listener is well versed with that particular language, with that particular subject, or else it might get lost in context. The meaning of the jargon might not be understood by the listener. Yes. Next is verbosity. What does verbosity exactly mean? So verbosity means that whenever we are trying to communicate, we should use as less words as possible. That is, we should keep it crisp and to the point. However, it should not be like like when we were speaking about simplicity. So just to ensure that the sentence or the communication is simple, we should not sacrifice on the meaning. Similarly, verbosity, it means to use as less words as possible. So basically, verbosity indicates quality over quantity. So say, for example, when we are given a task of writing an essay of, say, about 200 to 300 words. So just to reach that word limit of 200 or 300, we might add a lot of words which might not be necessary or important for that particular essay. But just to fill up that gap of 200 to 300 words, we might add it. And that is something that should be avoided in communication, because when the user is reading, they should be able to get the maximum understanding from the least amount of words that can be used. Next up, we have short words. So short words, again, instead of using complicated, long technical words, we can use short words to keep the conversation very simple. Similarly, we have precise meaning. Precise meaning indicates that any words, any phrases that we are using, they need to be to the point. So when we say to the point, it should not be like beating around the bush, wherein we are trying to fill the gaps or trying to fill the conversation with a lot of words. We should ensure that we are using words which have a precise meaning. And coming to the last part of choosing the right words, we have gender neutrality. So what do we mean when we say gender neutral words? So say, for example, a very basic example that we can take up here is the use of the word chairman. So earlier, when we wanted to say somebody who's heading a particular institution or a meeting or the board, we would use the word chairman. But of late, with the changing trends, we have moved to the adaptation of chairperson. So as we can see here, we have used the word person over the use man, which indicates that the chairperson can either be a male or a female. So this way, gender neutrality is mentioned. So there is no male superiority that we are showing while we are using any word. So this way, to make our words inclusive, to make our words gender neutral, we need to keep these points in mind. So yes, so this was about how we need to choose the right words. So far we have understood the meaning of the vocabulary, the importance of vocabulary, how is a person's vocabulary determined, or how do they choose the words that they use in their daily conversations. And lastly, we have now seen what are the tips in which we can choose the right words. So now moving on to the next part of it. Yes. So next one is synonyms. So now, to understand what fills up the English vocabulary or what are the terms that are used in the English vocabulary, we will be dealing with each of these one by one. So the first one we have is synonym. So synonyms are basically words which have a same or a similar meaning, and they are often used interchangeably. So in the English language, there might be multiple words with the same meaning. So say, for example, we have easy, light. All of these words can be used like interchangeably, or we can say happy, joy. So if you could see, these words have more or less the same meaning, but no two words in the English language will have the exact same meaning. And hence, to differentiate those words from one another, we have the concept of synonyms. So coming to a very basic example of the four words that are displayed on our screen right here. So we have begin, commence, start, and initiate. So if you see, all of the four words have very similar meaning, that is to start something or commence something. But let's see the scenarios in which it is used. So begin is basically the most common type of word that is used of all the four words. Begin, as we all know, it means to start something. But the context in which this is used is mostly in like verbal communication or informal conversations. However, when we come to commence, commence is something that is used more in a formal setting as well as in written communication. So if we say the court proceedings have commenced at 10 a.m., or if we say the act has commenced as on. So all of this, if you can see, these are used in more formal or written communication, whereas begin was used in more informal communication. Coming to the third word that we have here is start. So again, start might seem to have a very similar meaning to begin and commence. So the meaning is similar, but the context in which we use the word start is different. So start often indicates the beginning of a race. So if we say the race has started or the competition will start at 2 p.m. So if you could see, the meaning is more or less the same, but the context in which it is used is different. And initiate again has a very similar meaning, but it means to put efforts to start something. To put efforts to start something. So, say for example, we could say the teacher was the one that initiated this particular activity in the school, or the school leader was the one who initiated the celebration or any program. So, if you can see here, all the four words have very similar meaning, but the context in which they are used, and there's a slight difference in the meaning that sets them apart from each other. So now, to have a deeper look into the types of synonyms and the different examples for synonyms, let's quickly move to our module. Yes. So if you could see here, we have some examples of synonyms that we have, that is words which have more or less the same meaning and are often used interchangeably. So we have the word abstain. So abstain could mean refrain or withhold. So we could use, the director abstained from giving their vote. The director refrained from giving their vote, or the director withheld their vote. So these words have more or less the same meaning and they can be used interchangeably. Similarly, we have abridge. So abridge can be shortened or curtailed. So for example, to use abridge in a sentence would be, this was an abridged form of a 300-page document, which means that this was a shortened form of a 300-page document. Now, next up, we have abundant. So as we all know, abundant means something in excess or something that is a lot. So the other words, all of these words mean something that is in excess or something that is a lot. So the other words for abundant can be plentiful, ample, or copious. Next, if we say, for example, we have the word achieve here. Achieve means to get something that you have worked hard for, or to accomplish something. So like we can see here, for achieve, the different synonyms that are in place are accomplish, execute, or gain. So this way we have a varied range or an entire list of synonyms that is available in our module. To just take up a few more examples before we move on to the next part of it. So if we say extravagant right here. So extravagant can be something that is extra, something that is more than what's required. So it can be excessive or wasteful. So if we say they held a extravagant wedding, or they held a lavish wedding, so it means something that was done in excessive of what was required. So we may refer to our module for more examples on synonyms that we have right here. Coming to the next part of it, yes. So after synonyms, we have the next concept of antonyms. So antonyms is basically words with the opposite meaning. So synonyms meant words with similar meaning, and antonym means words with the opposite meaning. That is what it intends. It gives the opposite meaning of that. So now, like very basic examples would be hot, cold, tall, short. So these are very basic examples that we can give for antonyms. Now, there are two ways in which antonyms can be formed. So one can be either in the form of adding a prefix to the word to give the opposite meaning, or it can be a completely different word. So when we say by adding a prefix, so now if I am saying ability, the opposite of ability would be inability. Similarly, if we are saying able, I would say unable, or even we can use disable. So here, to get the antonym or the opposite of ability and able, all we had to do is add a prefix. So the prefix here was in, un, and dis, this. So this is one way in which we can get the antonym. And the second way is a completely different word. So now say, for example, happy. The opposite of happy is sad. However, the opposite of happy can also be unhappy. So for the same word, there can be two ways in which we can get the antonyms. So one is by the usage of a completely different word, and the other one is addition of a prefix to that particular word to give out the opposite meaning. So let's quickly have a look at all the examples that are available in antonym. Now, the same word, before we begin with the examples, there's another example that I want to have a look at. So now the same word can have multiple antonyms depending on the context in which it is being used. So here the word we have as an example is soft. So now soft, if it is used in the context of drinks, so the opposite of soft becomes hot. So hot drinks as against soft drinks. Then there will be a soft color as against a bright color. Next, soft tones against weird tones. And then we have soft texture as against rough texture. Then we have soft light as against glaring lights. So if you could see here, there is one word, but for the same word, there are multiple words that can be used as antonyms depending on the context or the scenario in which we are using that particular word and its antonym. So again, we have the example of slender. So the opposite of slender. So say, for example, in the case of a cane, a slender cane as opposite to a thick cane. Similarly, a slender man as opposite to a fat man. A slender chance as against a bright chance. So the same word, depending on the context which it is being used, we can have multiple antonyms for the same word. Yes, so further, a few more examples of antonyms. So like I was mentioning, we have ability and inability, able, unable, abnormal or normal, accurate, inaccurate. So if we could see here, the antonyms of all of these four words are determined by adding a prefix to it. So we added in, un, abnormal, and inaccurate. So this way we just added a prefix and we got the antonym of the word. Similarly, like the other type we had is a completely different word. So as against bankrupt, we have the antonym as solvent. And for economical, we have extravagant. For diligent, we have lazy. For economical, we have extravagant like we saw earlier. For explicit, we have implicit. For exit, we have entrance. So this way, antonyms are words that give out the opposite meaning. So moving on to the next part of our chapter. So the next part that we are going to deal with to understand the English language better is the use of these two types of words, that is homophone and homonym. So if we could see here, so homophone. So homo is same and phone means sound. So homophones are the words with the same sound, but with different meanings. So let's understand with an example. So we have two words here, that is access and excess. So if you could see here, these words have almost the similar sound. That is, the pronunciation is more or less the same. However, the meaning that which we are using is different. So access is basically having the right to something or having the access. So if we say only the employees have access to building, or which means that the employees have reached to that building. So say, for example, we can write this down. So we'll say access to the building. However, excess means something that is prepared in extra of what was required. So if we can say food was prepared in excess. So here, access and excess, they have more or less the same pronunciation. However, they have completely different meanings from each other. Similarly, we have bear and we have B-A-R-E, bear, which means that these words are exactly the same in the pronunciation, but their spelling is different and also the context in which we use is different. So here this can mean the animal bear, and this can mean without something. So if I am saying he went to the temple barefoot, it means that he went without any footwear. So these two words have the same sound, but they have completely different meanings. So that is homophone for us. Next up is homonym. So homo is same and nym is name. So these are words with the same name, that is the same spelling, but different meanings. So again, we can take this previous example of bear right here. So we have bear So bear can mean the animal bear or to take the responsibility of something. So if we are saying he is the one who will bear the cost of the function, it means that that particular person will take up the responsibility of the expenses of that function. Similarly, if we are using this in other context, this can mean the animal bear. So now let's look at a quick few examples that are given in our module. So homophone, the first one we have is access and excess, the one that we dealt with earlier. And then there is advice with a C and advice with a S. So advice with a C is basically noun. The father gave his daughter advice. So that becomes a noun that is used. Or if we are saying the father advised his daughter, then we are going to use the word S in the context of verb. So we have advice, which is noun. And then we have advice with an S, which is a verb. So the same pronunciation, but the spelling is different as well as the meaning is different. Then we have 8 and 8. So 8 is basically the past form of eat and 8 is the number 8 that we use. Yes, and then we have bear and bear that we already saw, and cell and cell. So cell with a C and cell with a S. So the pronunciation is exactly the same, but the spelling is different and the context or the usage is different. So cell basically means a prison, or it can also mean a cell phone. And to sell something is to exchange a product or service that we usually use. This is sell. Next up, to have a look at a few more examples of homonyms, that is the same name but different meanings. We have the first one is address. So the address, if you can see here, the spelling is exactly the same, but the meaning or the context in which it is used will be different. So now if I am saying I can give you the address of a good attorney. So we are using address as a noun here. That letter was addressed to me. Here we are using address as a verb. So we have the same name, same spelling, but different meanings in which we can use. Next up, we have band. So the band here, it means a group of musicians. And here she always ties her hair back in a band. It means the rubber band that we're talking about. Next up is bat. So one is the animal bat and the other one is the cricket bat that we all talk about. Next up is match and match. So do not strike a match. So this is talking about matchsticks and this is used as a noun. But the next sentence, if we could see, her fingerprints match those found at the scene of the crime. So here the match means a verb. Last two examples for homonyms is mean and mean. What does this sentence mean? This means what is the meaning of the sentence? He needed to find a mean between the frankness and the rudeness. And we can also use it as the adjective mean. The teacher was mean to the student or the student was mean to the teacher. So this is also possible. And next up, right. So one way is right, which means correct. And the other right is a right turn, which is used for direction. So this way we have the concept of homophone as well as homonym. So just to give a quick differentiation between the two. So in homophone, it will be the same pronunciation. Here in homonym as well, the pronunciation is going to be the same, or it may be different depending on the context. Here, it will be different spelling. Here, it will be the same spelling, and this will be different meaning. And here also, even though the spelling is same, the meaning will be different depending on the context. So a quick two examples to say here. So we have access and access. And for homonym, we have address. So this can be either in the form of noun that we use or a verb. So this is the differentiation between two types of words that we have in the English language, that is homophone or the homonym. So far, we have understood the vocabulary, its meaning, the importance, what are the factors that influence the vocabulary, how do we choose the right words. Then we saw synonyms, antonyms, homophones, and homonyms. Moving on to the next part of the chapter. So further, how can we improvise on the vocabulary while we are using the English language in our communication? So the first tip that we have right here is single words for a group of words. Now, like we were mentioning earlier in choosing the right set of words, we understood that our conversation is to be short, it is to be precise. So to keep our conversation short and precise, we can use single words over a group of words. Now, let's take, for example, if we want to say that this particular item is very delicate, it needs to be handled with care. So there we can use the word fragile. So fragile is something that is delicate or can be easily broken. So here, instead of saying this item can be easily broken, we will just say this item is fragile. So we can see here, so for this particular entire group of words, we have just used a single word. So this will help in keeping our conversation to the point. Next up, we have is words that are frequently misspelled. So there are certain words in the English language in which we can see common errors while spelling. So say, for example, a more common example is tomorrow, wherein this is the actual spelling of tomorrow. But many a times people write tomorrow with two M's or with single M, so on and so forth. So we should be careful while using any of the words that are frequently misspelled. We should carry out extra caution while using these words. So this becomes important in case of a written communication, because that is when spelling will come into picture. Now, next up is spellings and pronunciation. So in the English language, we use phonetics. So phonetics basically mean the sound of that particular letter. However, even if the letters are the same in the English language, there might be a few instances wherein, in spite of the letters being exactly the same, the pronunciation will become different. Now, say for example, we have the spelling D-O-V-E. So this becomes dove. Now, with the use of the same letters O-V-E, I am going to write C-L-O-V-E. This becomes clove. So here, while pronunciation, we need to take care, because even though the spellings, that is the OVE is present in both the words, the way in which we pronounce this is entirely different. Similarly, if we are saying lip, we are using this like he lived for 87 years. So that is the manner in which we are pronouncing live. However, if we can say this was a live match. So even though the spelling is the same, the manner in which this is pronounced is different. So this can be the case of a homonym that we were speaking about earlier. And here, if we are saying the spelling A-L-I-V-E, this becomes alive. So even though L-I-V-E is present in both the words, the pronunciation is different. So caution needs to be taken care whenever we are using these words. And this is mostly important in case of our verbal or oral communication, because that is when pronunciation comes into place. And like again, we were speaking earlier, words frequently misspelled. We should avoid any spelling errors, that is in case of written communication, so that we are using the right word. And in addition to using the right word, we are also using the word in the right context with the correct meaning. Next, stress and rhythm. So basically, this speaks about the syllables that we have in the English language. So if I am saying dove, so dove is a single syllable. Next, if I am saying alive, alive, there are two syllables, and in syllable, there are three syllables. So depending on the number of syllables that are there in the word, the stress or emphasis needs to be given on that particular word. And the rhythm in which we are communicating, the modulation, the tone will all depend on the number of syllables and the context in which we are communicating. So now, to understand each of these topics deeply, let's quickly go back to our module for more examples. So yes. So first one single group for a group of words where we took the example of fragile. Let's see a few more examples. So now suppose we want to take up the example of amateur. So what do we mean? One who learns a subject as a hobby. So if instead of saying she is learning art as a hobby, we can say she is an amateur artist. Or if we are saying she is learning this particular game as a hobby, we can say he or she is a amateur gamer. Then we have the example of fragile that we were talking about earlier. Then we have a vacillate, which means to show indecision or to sway to and fro in a decision. So if we have to say this particular person was confused in taking a decision, or he kept changing his decision again and again, so we can say he was vacillate while making his decision. Now to just have a look at a few more examples. So we can say malcontent. So what exactly does malcontent mean? A person who is dissatisfied and is inclined to rebel. So as we can see in the name itself, content, so we have added the word mal here, which became the antonym of content. So person who is dissatisfied, who is not content, and because of which there are chances that he might rebel against that particular thing. So if you could see here, if we used all of these words in our conversation, instead of its actual lengthy meaning, our conversation would become short, simple, and to the point. So next we saw words that were frequently misspelled. So this is something that needs to be taken care of in written communication. So if we can see here examples, we have for absence, there are, so instead of S, there might be a C that can be used, or instead of a E, there might be a that can be used. So these might also look like the correct spellings, but these are not the correct spellings. These are the correct spellings for all of the words that are there here. Similarly, we have accommodate, wherein the actual spelling consists of two M, but there are chances we might just write one M. In case of achieve, there might be case wherein we are interchanging the E and I. Similarly, for calendar, instead of an A, we can have a E. And then instead here, it's a liaison with an I additional, which is missing in our misspelled word. And for receipt, instead of using EI, we might use IE. And in case of tomorrow, that the example that we took earlier, we might insert 2M or a single R and a single M. So these, if we look at these single-handedly, they look like the correct spellings. However, it is to be ensured that we are using the correct spelling anytime there is a written communication. Now, spellings and pronunciation, like I was saying, the phonetics in which we use it might be different from the spelling. So now here, if we see the sound in the middle of the words steep and breach. So even though the pronunciation is same, it contains an E in both their words, that is a steep and a breach. If you could see here, the pronunciation is coming from a EE here. However, in case of breach, it is coming as EA. So this way, now say for example, if I am saying create. So here also there is a EA, but the manner in which the EA is pronounced in breach is different from the manner in which create is pronounced. Next up is the spelling errors. So what are the scenarios or instances in which we can have these spelling errors? So now spelling errors are common when certain alphabets are repeated in a word. So when we were talking about the case of tomorrow, we know that there are repeated. So many a time speakers usually tend to repeat M as well. Then occasion, beginning, profession. Now there will be a confusion even in case of EI and IE. So we saw the example of receipt for this. Then we saw achieve. Then we can have protein. So here, if we can see, even though the pronunciation is the same, in some cases the E comes first, in some cases the I comes first. Now next, if we can see this example here, E can be either dropped or retained when changing the root word. So here we have two root words, that is true and sincere. So here, when we are saying truly, we should make sure that we are not including this E here. So truly becomes truly without an E. But when we are saying sincerely, the E is retained. So depending on the word, we need to see if the E is retained or not retained. And there might be chances of a spelling error. Like truly can be spelled with the E, but that will become a wrong spelling. Now, and extra letters at times alters the meaning of the word. So here we have LOSE lose and LOOSE lose. So here LOSE lose is to lose the possession of something. I lost my phone. Now, if we are saying LOOSE, it is the opposite of tight. That is something that is not tight. The pants were loose. So here, by just the or adding of another O to this loose, the entire meaning and the spelling of the word gets changed. Now, when noun and the verb forms have the same pronunciation but different spellings. So this was like we saw advise and advice. So advice with a C would be the noun form of the word, and advice with a S would be the verb form of the word. Similarly, we have a practice with a C and practice with a S. So practice with a C is the noun and practice with a S is the verb. Now, words which have the same pronunciation but different spelling. So these are again homophones that we were talking about. So even in case of homophones, we need to understand which word we are exactly referring to. And depending on the word, we should also take up the spelling. Now, when a choice has to be made within ISC and IZD, so again, this is a common place wherein both S and Z are used interchangeably, but depending on the word, we need to select the correct spelling. Yes. Coming to the next part that we saw is the stress and rhythm. So we were speaking of syllables. So syllables is basically the minimum rhythmic sound of a spoken language. So a word may have one or more syllables. So now if we can see these words fame, name, claim, train. So there's only one syllable that we have while we are pronouncing the word. And then there are words like address, confess, redress, transgress, wherein there are two syllables. And then we have three syllables in all of these words, that is credentials, sacrifice, tarpaulin. And then there are four syllables in retribution, satisfaction, transatlantic. And then there are syllables or words with even five syllables wherein we are saying conglomeration. So this way, now if we want to read the word, so often what happens is in dictionary they will have the stress marks, that is how the word has to be pronounced, by adding this particular symbol above. So we may look at any dictionary, and to understand the pronunciation we can look at the marks that are being put against that particular word. So now we have the last part of this part one of chapter 2 that is remaining, and that is abbreviations. So abbreviations, as we all know, is basically a short form of a word, phrase, or text. So how do abbreviations help in enriching the vocabulary? It makes the conversation short, simple. So when we are saying a single word as against a group of words, abbreviations is also an addition to that, because abbreviation will shorten the word. So now if I am saying Ministry of Corporate Affairs. So in a conversation, instead of saying the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, we can say MCA, and the conversation becomes much easier to understand and it becomes short and simple. So we can avoid the usage of additional words when we can have just one single abbreviation that can be used here. So now we can see the different abbreviations that are used in the English language. So again, there are two types of abbreviations. So the abbreviations can be private abbreviation or commonly used abbreviation or known abbreviation. Commonly used or known abbreviation. So what do we mean when we say private abbreviation? Private abbreviation is individual specific, wherein, say, for example, if a student is taking notes, and to make those notes short and quicker to take, we might use the short form of certain words. So that becomes a private abbreviation, which is not commonly used. And commonly used, like when I was saying, for the example of MCA or Mr. for that matter, these are all used by the public, and it's common across all the speakers of the language. Now, let's see the types of abbreviation. So now, the different types of abbreviation that we have in the English language. So now the first letter or 2-3 words are used to form an abbreviation. So we have MA, which is basically the first letter of these two words that is taken here, Master of Arts. Then we have PM, which is Post Meridian, and BBC, it is the British Broadcasting Corporation. Now, if you see here, these abbreviations all are used with a full stop. Now, there can be abbreviations, that is short form of a word, which will be used, but there will be no full stop. So for manuscript, we can use the abbreviation MS, but there is no full stop after MS. And now, Acronyms are words formed from the initial letter of other words. So, very common example, United Nations International Children Emergency Fund. So now instead of having to repeat all of these 6 words whenever we are referring to this particular organization, we can just say UNICEF. So UNICEF is basically the first letter of each of these words that we have available here. So UNICEF becomes commonly used. So any person, if we are using the word UNICEF, we know that it refers to this particular organization. Similarly, FII, FICII, CCI. Now, next up, the first and last letters of a single word. So usually it would be the first letter of all the words that are available. But however, if there is a single word that is in place, then we can use the first and the last letter for that. So in case of Mr., we have picked up the first and the last letter, that is M and R, so it becomes Mr. And in case of doctor, we have picked up D and R, which becomes doctor. Now, a few more examples that we can see here are scientific terms. So when we are saying kilograms, so instead of kilograms, we can say kgs, or if we are saying amperes, we can say AMP. Next up is chemical symbol. So this is something that we would have studied as a part of the periodic tables that we have in chemistry. So instead of calcium, we can say Ca. So again, this abbreviation is taken as the first 2 letters. Hydrogen is just H. NaCl is sodium chloride. So again, Na is sodium and Cl is chlorine. So the combination of these two becomes NaCl, and then we have H2O, that is for water. Now, when we are using plurals in abbreviations, how can we use this particular plural? So usually the plural of an abbreviation comes with the addition of S. So instead of now, say, for example, the general rule to make an abbreviation plural is to repeat the same alphabet. So if we have page, then PP becomes pages, and also by addition of an S, like we were talking about earlier. So MAs, MP. So if we are saying the member of the parliament gathered, all the members. So instead of saying that, we can say MPs. So this becomes the plural. However, every time an S is added to a particular abbreviation, it doesn't become the plural. A very common example of this is Mr. So if after Mr. we are adding S, it does not become Misters, it becomes Mrs. That is the female version of Mr. So this way we need to understand that there is not one set of rules that are applicable for abbreviations across the English language. The use comes on the context, and this way the vocabulary needs to be rich to understand in what context what plurals are supposed to be used. However, in certain cases, there is no addition of S at all to determine plural. So we can say 1 kg, 4 kg, and the meaning would still be the same. So 1 indicates singular, 4 indicates plural. Yes. So now we have come to the end of part 1 of chapter 2 of our CSEET business communication. So to quickly summarize the entire chapter that we have dealt with so far, we spoke about vocabulary. So vocabulary is basically the language known or the range of words that a particular person knows and how important vocabulary is. So we saw the importance of vocabulary. Then we saw the choice of words. So under the choice of words, we saw how the range of words that the person knows, the type of communication, the context, the regional or national influence that the nation has on a particular person's vocabulary. And next up, choosing the right set of words. So we saw how words need to be simple, it needs to be precise. We need to understand where jargons are to be used, jargons are to be avoided. Next up, to understand the words better, we saw synonyms, that is words with similar and interchangeable meanings, wherein we saw an example of begin, commence, start, and initiate. And then we saw antonyms, that is word which give out the opposite meaning. Again, this can be by adding a prefix to the word, or it can be an entirely different word. Homophone is words with the same sound, different spelling, and different meaning. Then we have homonym, which is the same name, that is the same spelling. It can have the same or different pronunciation and different meaning based on the context in which we are using. Then a few more factors that which helps us in giving a richer vocabulary is single words against a group of words. pronunciation of the words depending on the spelling. And then we saw spelling errors or frequently misspelled words. And last two things, we saw the stress and rhythm. That is basically the syllables and how we need to provide emphasis based on the number of syllables. And lastly, we saw abbreviation and how can any abbreviation be made into a plural form. So this was part 1 of our chapter 2, enriching vocabulary of our business communication. So we will be back with part 2. Until then, thank you so much.